recording has started. We already got started just a little bit, looking at the Euro Australian dollar that we were checking out last night at the webinar, and Kayla was just telling me about her thoughts on the Euro Australian dollar. So I'll let you continue now, Kayla.
All right, thank you. It was just interesting because there's a few candles where the candles are really, really small, but the wicks are really not small. Like you can tell that there's been a lot of bull and bear fighting over them, and the volume on these is, it's quite large, and it's I don't know. I'm glad that we looked at it last night so we could draw our attention to it and, just following up this morning to see what it looks like. But it's
Yeah.
it's interesting to see just over a matter of 12 hours how much has happened just with the Euro Australian dollar.
Yeah.
But it's pretty, I don't know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been looking at that this morning, and
Yeah.
that's,
Kind of
yeah.
what I was doing too, because I couldn't actually remember what it was that I had said about any of these currency pairs. I know that sounds kind of, I don't know, not professional, like at all, but I totally forgot what it was that I had talked about with these currency pairs. So, with the Euro Australian dollar, we had talked about after leaving the circle. I don't even remember where the circles were drawn. I kind of want to go back to the webinar, but yeah, we had talked about it coming back down to this little resistance support line that we had. That's been pretty. Let's see. Let's run back over here now. It's been pretty consistently hit. We had it being hit right here. The market stalled out right across the line. And then it went back up, and then it came back down and tried to touch it again, but it couldn't touch it again. And then it came back up, and then it came back down. It broke it, and it came back up to make it a resistance line. And it's been hovering around here. So I was anticipating if we broke past this line right here, that we would see it come back down to our little support line down here. And overall, the market is on the Euro Australian dollar. We're making lower highs and lower lows. So I think selling on this currency pair is not the worst idea. Although we did just have a very large sell candle that broke down through what I think I had drawn as a circle last night.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm assuming that was where I had drawn it, was right there.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to redraw some of the circles that we were looking at from last night. And we're also going to reconsider some of these support and resistance lines. I'm going to leave this one in place because it's pretty cool. It seems to be working out fairly well for us. And we're going to switch over to a 4-hour chart just so we can get a nice overview of what's going on. All right. Yeah, I left it right there. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and place a couple of additional lines. Now, I almost never use support and resistance by itself. I believe support and resistance is fantastic, and it's a great way to see where where some of the levels are that the market is stalling out, and where it's going, where it's been, and it's good for entering and exiting trades, because really I feel like the hardest part of trading is figuring out, not necessarily figuring out which direction to trade. it's more when to get into one of those trades, and that's where support and resistance, for me personally, comes in, is helping me to figure out entries and exits for trades. I mean, I believe pretty much any trade you get into, you can get out of profitably as long as you plan it out right and you don't panic, don't get freaked out, and don't start making bad choices, based on fear and all those other bad emotions. You can get out of trades and still be okay. Hence the British pound New Zealand dollar trade from Monday that I took that ended up going to a stop loss, but I have the robots running and it made back that loss within the same day, and so it's always best to not panic. So uh, let's uh, let's move on just a little bit. We're gonna go back down to the 1 hour chart. All right. So we're going to redraw some of those kindergarten circles that I was drawing last night. I'll come up with a better name for them eventually. I never had to give this system a name because I was always just drawing circles. So I don't know. I'll come up with a better name for it, I promise. And what other circle do I want to draw? How about...
Hey Wes, did you see John's comment?
Yes, he
Okay.
had talked about a head and shoulders pattern. We will jump over to head and shoulders here in just a moment. I haven't had dandruff in a long time though, so I am probably going to be fine without. Okay, that was really, really cheesy comment, but
You're
uh, all right. Actually, I'm going to leave this one right here. It's a little bit closer to the more recent candle than I like to see, but that is going to be fine for now. Okay. So right now, I'm not really looking at doing much of anything with the euro Australian dollar, but if I mean, I'm already in a buy trade from the robots. I don't even. They placed the a buy trade here while it was on its way down. And so, I mean, I can tell you what I'm hoping is going to happen, and I can tell you what I actually think is going to happen. Um, what I hope is going to happen is we're going to bounce off of this nice support line that we've been looking at, and we're going to go a little bit higher and probably not make a new high because, I mean, we are looking at a I hate to say trend when it's only just it's a very short amount of time, but we are making lower highs and lower lows now. So it's possible that we're going to see some movement down before we actually see that bounce back up. But if we get outside of this circle and we are still above this support line, so in just a few hours, if we're still above the support line, then I'm going to either double down on this buy trade, or if it's above where I already placed the buy trade, then I'll let it keep going, and it'll go into profit pretty fast. If we're below this support line when we exit the circle, then I'm probably just going to get out of that buy trade at a loss and then place a somewhat larger sell trade just to get down to this line right here. Now, it wouldn't be a whole lot of pips, but it'd be about 30 pips, and I'd be looking to sell down to here which is 1.5465. But if we exit the circle and we're still above this support line that we're hovering at right now, then I'm probably going to uh, either double down on the buy that I already have if we're still down here, or I'm going to just wait for this buy trade to go into profit. This is not the ideal place for a buy trade, but the robots place trades based on other systems that are more robotic in nature, obviously. So we had on the Australian dollar US, wait, sorry, the Euro Australian dollar. We've been placing some pretty decent trades for the most part, except for this crap sell trade right here. That was not ideal. And then we had a nice sell trade here. We had a sell or a buy trade that didn't go terribly great until we placed a second buy trade down here, which, man, that was a good buy trade. Let me zoom in because this is probably looking really odd on your screens. So the first buy trade was here, which was not the most ideal place to buy. But then the second buy trade was here all the way down at the bottom of the move. And so we didn't have to move very far to go into profit. So that was a good trade. And then we had a sell trade that basically broke even. And it immediately took a buy trade. And so now we're just waiting for the buy trade to come back around. I'm fairly confident it's going to come back around. So maybe I'll adjust what it is that I'm thinking it's going to do. Everything is still the same. If it makes it out of the circle, it's still above the line, then I'm going to double down on the buy trade. If it makes it out of this circle and it's below the line or at the line, actually, if it's at the line, I'm still going to double down on my buy trade. But if it's below the line, I'm probably going to sell, get out of this buy trade, and then just sell for about 20 to 30 pips and make up the loss that I made on this buy trade that was not so great. But no matter what, I don't think we're going to be looking at a big move down, because it would go contrary to our little tiny inner circle here. And no one really wants to go inside the inner circle. I don't know what that means. It probably means absolutely nothing, but to me it feels right. Okay. Oh, Frederick asked, the circle of profit, that's funny. But Frederick asks if these are mad trades. No, these are actually insanity robot trades. Right now, last week I closed out of all of the moving average divergence trades that were running. I didn't just close them all out at loss or anything. I watched them, and as they went into profit and as they closed out on each currency pair, I took the robot off. So by the end of last week, I actually had only 2 trades open, and they were both on the Australian dollar, US dollar. And those trades are still open. They're going to be open for quite a while, I think. Yeah. Replaced by the robots quite a while back. But then I brought the Insanity robot onto a bunch of currency pairs, and that one's been running since Sunday night, or Monday morning. Yeah, they've been running since Monday morning. So, yeah, right now I'm running the Insanity robot. In the next couple of weeks or so, I'm going to wind down the Insanity robot trades, and I'm going to put the moving average divergence robot back on most of these currency pairs, and I will also be putting the volume bot on a few currency pairs, and then watching that go for a few weeks. And more or less, that's how I switch around with the robots, and I try and keep risk at a minimum by doing that. Now, if you just use the same robot, full time, then that's totally cool. That's no problem. I don't like the I don't like the thought that I might get bored and start fiddling with the trades, so I like to switch it up a little bit occasionally. Okay. All right. Frederick, I'll be sharing some of those settings on the website today, actually. I'll be putting those up there. So you'll be able to find them in the Insanity Robot section of the robots course, and I'll send out an email when that's done. So for right now, I think we're going to move right along to the Euro New Zealand dollar. Man, circles are all out of whack. There we go. Okay, so yesterday we talked about the Euro New Zealand dollar, and I don't think this circle was like that. There we go. All right. And we talked about if we leave the circle and we are still below this line, then we would try buying up to this line, and that worked out actually pretty good. This line has been a pretty good resistance line for us after we broke down below it again. This line's been pretty consistent actually for the past week or so, because we've had it started out as a resistance and then we broke through it really fast, came back down to it, couldn't break it, and then we just had to break down through it really fast, came back up, and we couldn't break through the resistance line, so we had to had a very fast move right back above it, and it became a support line again. And then the market came back down, and we didn't break it. I love seeing this because it makes me feel a little bit better about the support and resistance lines. Let me zoom in now. Whenever we see a big candle like this, or even like this doji right here, where it went way above, and then it was hovering around for just a little while, and then it ended up closing below that line, and then we had to have a big candle break through it in order to. That to me is a good indication that it's a line that people are looking at, and that traders are using for their own support and resistance. Because we look at this candle right here, this massive candle that came all the way down, broke through it, but then came right back up again and closed above it. And then we had this candle right here that was just super hesitating at this line and finally broke down below it, and then we just stayed below it for a little while. Then we came back up, and we still couldn't break back above it until we had a very large move above it. And then we had a couple of candles that stayed above this line, and then we broke back down through it. So it just, to me, that's a good indication that we're looking at a decent support and resistance line. Now, looking back in time is one thing. Looking back and saying, oh, look how many times this thing was touched, or look how many times they got really close to it, et cetera, et cetera. But then when we see it in real time, which we saw it in real time yesterday, yesterday, and Monday, actually. Yeah. What was I saying? Oh, when we see it in real time, it actually makes me feel a little bit better about the line still being a decent support and resistance area. If we were to see it just, I don't know. I think I'm going to move on from that particular train of thought because it derailed a little while back. Okay, Euro New Zealand dollar. Let's go ahead and draw some new circles on here. I'm going to keep this support resistance line because it is fairly reliable. I'm going to move this one up to here just because I like to consolidate the zone that I'm looking at as much as possible. and we're going to call this our little, I don't know, support resistance channel. And overall, we're making, same as the Australian dollar, New Zealand dollar, we're making lower highs and lower lows. So overall, I think sell trades are fairly safe on this currency pair. But we want something to actually confirm that hypotenuse. I know it's actually hypothesis, but hypotenuse feels like a funnier word, so I use it more. There we go. All right. You know what? Let's bring this out to encapsulate those guys right there. You know what? I like that circle. That's a good circle. All right, so I do feel like this currency pair is going to continue down because I'd like to see it fill in a little bit more of this little circle of profit. And if I could erase parts of these circles, that would feel even better. You know what? I'm going to move this resistance line back, or the support line back down here, because then it cuts the circle right in half. And I like that. I like it. I like seeing the circles being cut in half, because then it makes me feel like it has something to do with geometry or trigonometry or something. Anyways, I'd like to see a little bit more of this circle of profit get filled up before it just completely exits the circle. And if that means the support line down here is going to get touched, or if that means it's going to get touched up here, I'd actually probably be more comfortable with it just going down to this recent low down here. But we could also, we could very well see it fill in half of the circle. I don't know. I usually like to stay conservative in my exits on trades that I'm placing in a discretionary fashion. I prefer to keep the stop losses close and the profit targets close. I don't go for large amounts of profit unless I'm extremely confident in direction. And that's why my robots go for very little, small amounts of profit. That's why they take a whole lot of trades. But let's make a determination here that will be a little bit more, I don't know, something that people can actually place a trade based on, including me. You know what? Let's make this line go to there. Oh, yeah. See, now that is a pretty trend line. I like that trend line. Okay. Let me draw one other trend line. Yeah, I'm going to use the body of this candle just because I don't like super long wicks. Although I guess that would probably allow it to stretch all the way over to here. Huh. I'm not going to do it anyways. There we go. Okay. Now, even though the direction that we're looking at right now is kind of downward, this currency pair has been moving up for a little while. I mean, overall, we've been moving up on the Euro New Zealand dollar. So I wouldn't be going for some long-term sell trade, but I would like to see it fill in a little bit more of this circle. That's all I'm saying. And let me bring this one back up here. So, and yeah, just a little further up. That's a better line to look at. Okay. So right now we're at 77. I'd like to see this candle close before I actually consider taking a trade on this, because it's just, I don't know, if we look at and I talk about this quite often, but if we look at the story behind what's going on here, where the bulls and the bears are fighting over what direction they want to go, and etc., then right now it seems so indecisive. We're right between these two support and resistance lines, and we don't have anything to say that we're not just going to go sideways and then jump up. So I'm hesitant to say anything about the Euro New Zealand dollar. I would probably, if I were to take a trade on this, I'm going to wait until it moves outside of this circle, and whichever line it's closer to, I'm probably going to take a trade in the opposite direction. So if we're closer to this resistance line, I'm probably going to take a sell trade down to this support line. Or if we actually do fill in some more of this circle, which I feel like we're going to. I feel like we are going to fill in some more of this little circle of profit here before we move out of the circle. But if we're closer to this support line, I'm probably going to end up trying to take a buy trade up to this resistance line, because it's been pretty reliable so far as a place that the market tries to go consistently. Ooh, I didn't want to do that. There we go. And yeah, I like that idea. I wonder if that idea even made any sense to anybody. If we break out of the circle and we're closer to this line, I'm probably going to take a buy trade up to this line. If we break out of the circle and we're closer to this line, I'm going to take a sell trade down to about this line. So that's all. And what actually, what I'd really like to see, just as a triple confirmation here, is I'd like to see it bounce off of this trend line that we have, because it is a pretty trend line. Look at that. So pretty. If we break out of the circle and we come up toward this line and we bounce off of this trend line, then I'm definitely taking a sell trade down to here. So that would be more of a triple confirmation going on. These circles just keep moving. Ask Smart Trader about that, why their circles can't seem to stay in one place. There we go. Okay, exit the circle. If we come up and touch this line or touch the trend line, we're going to bounce off of that. We're going to sell down to about here, which is 1.7144 or 45 if you really like rounding it off. All right, that's the Euro New Zealand dollar. And let's move on to British Pound New Zealand dollar. I like the British Pound New Zealand dollar, even though, it wasn't the British Pound New Zealand dollar's fault yet, Monday when I placed a trade and I got stopped out. It wasn't the British Pound New Zealand dollar's fault. It was my fault because I didn't place my stop loss far enough away. I was trying to be too conservative in my stop loss, so it was really my fault. I don't blame the British Pound and New Zealand dollar. I don't hold it against it. I don't hold a grudge, because that would be stupid, because it's a currency pair and not a person or whatever else. But let's go ahead and look for some support and resistance lines. I'm going to put this one here. Should we put this one? Yeah, you know what? I'm going to put it right there. And I'll show you why in just a moment. There we go. And there we go. Now, support and resistance, very, very subjective. You can't really, I don't know, you can't really tell someone that you have the support and resistance, I don't know, secret, I suppose. There are some people who just really suck at it, and there are some people who are pretty good at it, but there's no such thing as a perfect support and resistance system because it's subjective. And so for me, I like looking at the story of the market, like what the market's doing, and the narrative behind where it's at and where it's been, where it's going. So that's what I use to determine my support and resistance levels. Now, it seems kind of dumb that I pick a support and resistance level that's gone through so many candles, but this is a line right here, this middle line right here. In fact, this is almost it's kind of a cool channel, actually. Look at that. We've got a nice even spacing with these two lines, or these three lines. Anyways, if we look at this middle line right here, we see that the bulls and the bears have been fighting around this line for, gosh, 5 days now? Since Friday? Since Thursday. They've been fighting around this line. And no one's actually really come out on top because we go up, we go down, we go up, we go down, but we just keep hovering around here. So we broke through this line really fast, and then we came back down, broke through it really fast again, came back up, could not break it, came back up, could not break it, came back up, could not break it, could not break it, still couldn't break it, still couldn't break it, and then finally we had a big move past it, and then it corrected and came right back down again, and it stopped right at the line, and then we tried to break it again and couldn't break it, tried to break it again, still couldn't break it, and we still couldn't break this line. When you look at it, from candle to candle, you start to see a better picture of what's going on with the support and resistance lines. Whereas if we take the approach of looking at a really, really, I don't know, looking at the big picture, then this support resistance line looks dumb because it doesn't look like it's been it looks like it's just cutting through the middle of a bunch of stuff. And so to me, I like to look at the story behind it, which involves looking at individual candles and looking at what it's done. And actually, going back in time, I hadn't even looked at this, but we had this was actually a really good support resistance line because it was the top out for it back here as well. That's pretty cool. I mean, you guys saw that, right? Like, I'm not just crazy. I drew the line and then I looked back and it actually was a good, man. Sometimes the British pound New Zealand dollar makes me feel good about life. Now, I also drew this line right here. Now, the reason why I drew this line where I did was because it split these two buy candles in half. Well, not in half, but it was basically the mid-mark between these two bullish candles, and it was the bottoming out point for the bodies of these two candles, and then we still haven't broken it and closed below it yet. So that's why I picked this particular line here, and then this one, it was a nice little top for this candle, and then these two candles couldn't break above it either, and I actually originally had drawn it here, but actually that was the mistake that I made when I placed my stop loss. I placed a stop loss right there when I should have placed it up here. Or up here, that's right. I placed a stop loss all the way down here at the body of these two candles rather than placing it above the recent high. That's why I got stopped out of that trade instead of having a profitable trade. And man, that trade would have been good. Look, shoot. Sorry, still regret that just a little bit. All right, let's switch back to the 1 hour chart now. Now that we've got three nice little support resistance lines, and man, it looks good even from this perspective, like from the 1 hour chart, it still looks good. We came up, we couldn't break these this line up here, which actually this is how we drew this line in the first place, so obviously it wasn't broken. Came back down, couldn't break it on this candle, had to have a very large move down, came back up, hovered around it for a little while, couldn't break it, couldn't break it, couldn't break it, and then finally just blew past it, but then came right back down below it, came up above it, and just hovered around for a little while, came back, couldn't break past this line again. It just, right now, I just feel like this is a good range that we're in. And if we ever manage to break out of this range, we might be looking at a pretty large move in one direction or another. Let's see. And with a British pound New Zealand dollar, I mean, shoot, we'd be looking at anything really. And it just goes up and down like a roller coaster. It is pretty awesome. Sorry, we'll go back to the beginning now. There we are. Okay. Let's do our kindergartner circles thing. There we go. And let's do it right here. Yeah, I like that. All right. So we've got our little kindergartner circle drawn again. And, oop, I didn't mean to shrink that one. I meant to move it. Yeah, we'll ignore these really long wicks and just make sure that it's touching some of this stuff. There we go. Okay. I don't foresee us taking a very large move down at the moment. I foresee, that makes it sound kind of ominous. I'm going to draw a nice ray. Yeah, that trend line doesn't feel right. Somehow it feels wrong. That one feels wrong too. I don't like it. I don't like trend line on that one. All right. I think what I'm going to do is draw another circle here. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I know this looks like I'm just kind of screwing around. Give me just a moment while I line some things up here. Get a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. All right. So what does this tell us other than I like drawing eyeballs? This, okay, it doesn't look like much. It looks like a very large, looks like a cluster of circles and meaningless lines, etc. But we are looking at the market continuing in kind of the direction that it's already been going. And what I mean by that is, let me remove the circles now. Sorry, these were just for the sake of confirming a hunch. All right. I think we're going to continue to move along this line right here for just a little while. Uh, and then I think, let's see here. Sorry, I need to shrink this circle just a little bit. There we go. All right. We're going to continue to move along this line just a little bit. We may see little movements up and etc., but we're going to be touching this line. And then we're going to see some movement upward. And I think the market has another touch of this line left in it, the 1.943 line. I think we've got at least one more touch of that line left in it. And then we might see a big drop. But for right now, we're just going to stay inside of this little zone here. And yeah, I'm going to wait until we get a little bit closer to the edge of the circle. I'm going to shrink the circle again. It just doesn't feel quite right. Yeah, that feels a little bit better. Once we get to the edge of this circle, I will consider placing a buy trade or a sell trade. Now, that sounds really stupid because, of course, you'd be considering a buy trade or a sell trade because what else are you going to do? You can't just, I mean, you could just not take a trade, but of course you're going to buy or you're going to sell. Now, what I mean by that is if we close out above, let's see, I'd like to say the 50% line, but there's no 50% line at the moment. Let me draw one. There we go. If we leave the circle and we are above this line, I'm going to sell back down to about that line. If we break out of this circle and we are below this line, then I'm going to consider a buy up to this previous resistance line. Now, why do I say consider a buy up to this previous resistance line? Because I can't be completely positive it's going to make it back up to all the way back up to this resistance line. We're making lower highs, but we're making the same lows. I mean, we're not making lower lows. We're pretty steadily going across here, but we're making lower highs. And so there's a decent chance if we're down here when we close out of this circle, then I'm going to be confident enough in a buy trade to buy up a little past the 50% line. But if we're just about at the 50% line when we close out of this circle, I'm not going to place a buy trade up to here because we're making lower highs. And if we make another lower high, then I'll be getting into a trade that's just going to turn right back around again. So more likely than not, I'll be placing a sell trade on the British pound New Zealand dollar and selling down to this line because it's consistently being touched and it's a pretty resilient support line for us. And this is a very resilient support and resistance line. I don't see trying to get up to this line anytime soon. That doesn't mean the market's not going to try and get up to this line, but I'm going to count on it trying to stay below or at this line right here. And I just don't want to take the risk that if we're above the 50% line, 50% meaning 50% of the way between this line and this line. If we're above 50% when we exit this circle, then there's a decent chance that we're not going to make it all the way up to this line before we turn back around and come back down. Now, I think the British pound New Zealand dollar is eventually going to just break through both of those, but for right now, in the shorter term, and especially since we're in a holiday week, I wouldn't be looking to, I don't know, follow the long-term direction of the British pound New Zealand dollar. I'm not looking to touch this line again for a little while. I'd rather take a trade that will be in and out relatively quickly And the better of those is a sell trade back down to about this line. But again, waiting until we break out of the circle in order to do that. Okay, we have about 6 minutes left of this webinar. Let me take a look at the New Zealand dollar, US dollar, because that one was a lot of fun. I don't remember where any of these circles were. Smart trader needs to get their stuff together. I don't know why the circles keep like leaving. We haven't looked at this yet. Okay, cool. All right. We had a nice line drawn yesterday on the New Zealand dollar, US dollar, and it's been tested quite a few times as a resistance and a support line. Yeah, look at the market just hovering around it over here, and then coming over here. We saw it come down, and then it wasn't able to break it. We hesitated at this line, and then we just broke through it, came back up, couldn't break it, came back up, couldn't break it, and then came back up and blew straight through it, but then came right back down again, and now we haven't been able to break it again. So that's important to remember, because it means that this line is I don't know, you can kind of think of it as like a trench, no, not a trench. What are we going to call it? The front? Like a war? I don't know. If we're looking at a tug of war, this is like that little swampy stuff in the middle that, you know, if you pull your team over, then it's disgusting, or I don't know. I'm not good with coming up with metaphors at this time of morning. So instead, I'm just going to say this is a line that the bulls and bears are fighting over. The bears are trying to keep it below. The bulls are trying to push it above, and it's just it's I don't know. I think the bears are kind of winning on this one. Now we are making a few new highs. Well, not a few new highs. We made one new high, and now we're making lower highs again, and we're making higher lows. So whenever the market starts doing that, it's difficult to tell what exactly is going to be happening, which is why support and resistance is subjective, and you want to use more systems to confirm direction. That's why we're going to draw some more circles. Circles, yeah, there we go. That's a good circle. Now let's draw another one. There we go. I like right there. I'm going to shrink this down, though. Not that far. There we go. I'm going to do that. That looks good. So, especially looking at it this way, we're looking at okay. When we get to the edge of this circle, what we're probably going to see is the market continue to follow this circle down. So I would be looking to place a sell trade on the New Zealand dollar, US dollar. Not all the way down to this line, because we are making, you know, higher lows. So I would probably be looking to move this to a more recent line, a more recent support or resistance line, which I would think this one right here seems pretty good. It's pretty consistent. You know, we had a low down here, and then we had a low here, and then this low that the market made right here is higher than this one by just a little bit. So I'd be willing to say a sell trade on the New Zealand dollar, US dollar down to 68.05, so about 30 pips. I'm actually going to place that trade. Do I have any robots running on the New Zealand dollar, US dollar? Yeah, I have the Insanity robot running on that. Okay, I'm going to take the Insanity robot off because I don't want the Insanity robot to start trying to manage that trade for me. And I am going to take that down to about 3 micro lots, and I'm going to sell this puppy. Right? Did it just sell? Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right. Let me go into that trade, and I'm going to place a stop loss. Okay, can't move that out of the way. I guess I'm going to try and plan my stop loss first. Oh, I already have a stop loss up there. Sweet. There we go. Okay, stop loss is going to be 68.80. 68.80. Okay. And a profit target of 68.05. Sweet. Okay. Now that I actually took a stance on it, it's going to probably reverse and, tear me a new one. But we'll see how this one turns out because it sounds like a whole lot of fun. Let's see here. I'm just looking through the questions. All right. I think we are pretty much good to go. I'm going to stop the recording and then answer a couple of questions that came through that aren't necessarily related to the live trading room. So if you're watching this recording, thanks for being here and thanks for watching. And I will see all of you on Monday because I'm not going to trade on Thanksgiving. That would suck. But Monday the 27th is our next webinar, and it will be in the morning. So if you're watching the recording, bye for now. And if you are here live, you can stick around because I have a couple of questions I'm going to answer. Bye, Kayla.
Bye, Wes.